On the cold floor of an abandoned building, Fex could be seen lying on the floor. Snoring sounds would occasionally come out of his mouth, as well as some nasal sounds that indicated he was in deep sleep. Quinn didn't want to wake him up. He had gone far and beyond for the safety of others. It was a risky move he had pulled, turning into a bloodsucker, and he wasn't sure he could have done such a selfless act himself. "Maybe vampires aren't as bad as you say," Quinn said to the system. "The boy I am not worried about," the system replied. "Just like with humans, not every human is bad. But right now the situation you are in is. This is because of those at the top, and sadly, the same could be said for the vampires." Thankfully, Quinn was able to hide his identity using the costume and mask Logan had created for him. Also, Fex was unrecognizable as the bloodsucker. He had his uniform on, but in the fight with the king-tiered beast, it was badly damaged and had been rendered unrecognizable. The travelers looked like they were trying to help Vorden and Peter. Once Fex woke up, Quinn would go and meet up with them before they left the cave. But before all of that, there was still one thing he wanted to check out before leaving: the tower. There were a few reasons for this, and it was because of a few things the system had granted him after completing his last quest. Finally, with Fex sleeping away, Quinn had a chance to look at all the rewards, other than the EXP and the blood ability increase he had received. With the increase in blood skills, all his attacks related to blood skills had gotten stronger, but the most impressive of them all was the blood bank. It was now able to store double the amount of blood at 200 milliliters. 10 ml of blood restored 5 HP, which meant that his blood bank was filled to the brim. It would allow Quinn to restore 100 points of HP. This was one of his most important skills, as it often gave him a second chance during fights. Quest reward, unlock one ability skill. It seemed to be related to the shadow skill. Quinn was now able to unlock any of his remaining shadow skills. Still, there were 5 skills he was still unable to unlock. But one of these skills costs a total of 50 skill points to unlock, named Shadow Eater. With only 30 skill points, he was unable to unlock the skill before, but now he could. New skill, Shadow Eater unlocked. He would look at the details of the skill later. With every new skill, Quinn needed to master it first before using it in a fight. Now wasn't the time. Besides, there were a few more notifications the system had given him. He was a bit upset when he found out that he wasn't able to grab the king-tiered beast crystal, but in return, it seemed like the system had given him something else. Small blood crystal 1 obtained. That is a very rare item. Although you have no use for it now, I suggest you store it in your system for safekeeping, the system stated, refusing to elaborate. But hearing the system say such a thing was precious, it still placed a smile on Quinn's face. The last 2 notifications were the strangest, as they weren't rewards for completing the quest. Instead, they were new quests altogether. Quest, reach level 20 for next evolution. Reward, next evolution Vampire Noble. Additional rewards will be revealed once rank has been reached. Quinn had suspected that the next stage of his evolution process would be when he reached level 20, and the system seemed to have confirmed it. It seemed to have appeared now because Quinn was very close to achieving that level, now being level 18. When he asked about Fex, he remembered the system saying that Fex was somewhere between a vampire and a vampire noble. Not quite at the stage yet. Did this mean that he was now stronger, or just as strong as Fex? It was clear that there were some differences in terms of certain abilities and skills, but Quinn didn't believe his shadow ability was any weaker than Fex's string ability. Finally, the last notification. Quest, part 1 of 2. The king has been defeated, and now the tower is left unprotected. Search the tower and discover what treasure it was trying to protect. Suddenly, he heard someone groaning behind him. It looked like Fex was waking up. What the hell happened? Fex said, looking around at where he was. He then looked down and noticed the flask on the floor. Images of his transformation into bloodsucker appeared in his head, and he remembered everything that happened. You saved me? Fex said. Come on, I can explain while we're making our way over, Quinn replied. Over where? To the tower. The group of travelers had regrouped and were heading toward the students. Lily had been watching the fight carefully and wanted to join in, but she knew her duty was to stay by the students' side in case anything happened. There weren't many strong creatures in the underground tunnels, other than the hounds and the king-tier beast. They hadn't run into anything else down here. Still, that didn't mean there was nothing. Also, the group didn't know how strong the students they were protecting were. As she saw the 2 twins walking over groggily, she rushed over to their side. Are you both all right? I saw what happened. Who was that guy? she asked as she gave her shoulder to one of the bald twins. "That's what we want to know as well," Andre replied. "You students, your uniform, I assume you are from one of the military bases out on an outing. Second year, right?" "We're first years," Sia replied, going over to the traveler's side. She still hadn't grown fond of the others, especially since Pio had tried to not too long ago, and she didn't know why, but she had the strangest feeling that he was weirdly looking at her. Every so often her eyes would meet his. When this usually happens, one would find the whole thing awkward and turn their head, but when it happened with her and Pio, he would continue to stare at her as if he was picturing something. It gave her shivers, and she was a lot more trusting of the new travelers. "It's a good thing we came in time, then," Andy replied. "What is the military thinking sending in first years? Have the times gotten that desperate?" "Well, if you look at the structures around us, perhaps," Andre said. "I wanted to ask you guys, what happened? The king-tier beast on the ground. Did you see what happened to it? And do you know what that other creature was? And last of all, what about the strange demon-masked man?" Peter, Vorden, and Layla wanted to keep their mouths shut. They were tired from the battle and worried that if they were to explain things now, they might let something slip up. On the other hand, saying nothing would make them seem suspicious. The others looked in Vorden's direction. He was usually the best when it came to such things. They all nodded, confirming that he would be the one to come up with the story, but as he was about to speak, Sia chimed in. "That king-tier beast, it was by—" Sia had seen who had delivered the last blow, although Fex was the strange creature that had mostly injured it. She had seen that it was Quinn who had— "It was by me," another voice interrupted before Sia was able to finish her sentence. "Logan, are you okay?" Layla asked. "I'll live," Logan replied. His wounds on the outside had healed up from the little robots, but his ribs still hurt a little as he breathed in. He then walked over to the travelers and lifted his wristwatch, revealing that he was a level 8. "It took everything I had with the help of my friends here, but we were finally able to kill the king-tier beast. Right after, that strange creature had appeared and had taken me out of the fight, leaving the others to fight for themselves. As for the strange person who appeared at the end, your guess is as good as ours. He only appeared when you guys saw him as well." Andre started to think about Logan's words. They were convincing, and the power level on his watch was even more convincing. But what had convinced him more than anything was the strong, round, circular contraption that was on the top of his hands. He noticed straight away that they were used to create energy weapons. With the use of an energy weapon, what Logan had said would be quite achievable, especially as a level 8 ability user. Also, it was hard to imagine why the students would even lie in this type of situation when they had seen firsthand that the creature was trying to kill them. On the other hand, there was also Sia. She didn't know who the masked man was while the others did, but what she did know was that Fex was the one who had turned into a monster, and Quinn was nowhere to be seen after killing the king-tier. She wasn't completely stupid. Quinn had been using the red aura attacks, and the masked man had done the same. Most likely Quinn was trying to protect Fex. The question was, if Logan was lying and covering for them, it meant he also knew about all the secrets this group had and were hiding. Should I tell the travelers the truth? Sia thought. It was a hard one for her, but in the end, after looking at Logan, she decided not to. It was her way of returning the favor. Not only had she actually been saved by Quinn, but she had also been saved by Logan earlier. But with this, they were even. If anything else came up, she wouldn't hesitate to tell the others, but for now, she would keep the secret. "Okay, I've decided then," Andre said. "Let's take them back to the shelter. Their teachers must be worried about them." "But what about the tower?" Andy replied. "The tower can wait. It will still be here after we return the students. Besides, I feel like we have made a mistake by not informing the military about what was down here. Now the lives of students and perhaps others have been harmed when we could have prevented it." Andy looked annoyed. They had been fighting for days, trying to defeat the king-tier beast and find out what was down here. If it was some unknown powerful Dalki technology and the military got their hands on something powerful, it could ruin the balance of the leader's table. Looking at the injured students, he felt like Andre was right. His leader was always right, even if he was too kind sometimes. The students and the group of travelers started to head out of the small town. While doing so, Vorden and Layla would constantly look around, hoping to find Quinn and Fex, coming out at some point. But after several minutes of walking, they were nowhere to be seen. I hope you bring me a nice souvenir to work on from that tower, Quinn, Logan thought. He didn't think Quinn was... Something was telling him that Quinn was also interested in the strange tower, and he hoped Quinn would discover its secrets and bring back something for him to work on. While Logan was deep in thought, he felt a slight nudge to his side. "Logan, I don't think I can hold it in for much longer," Peter said, as he held his hand on his stomach. "What? If you want to go to the toilet, just go. It's too dark here anyway. Nobody will see anything," Logan replied. "No, it's not that." Hearing those words, Logan knew straight away what Peter meant. He was hungry. Before heading off to the tower, Quinn made sure of two things. The first thing was that his MC points were fully restored. Fex had been out for a while, so they only needed to wait a little longer before starting their journey again. The second thing was that he was fully equipped with all his equipment. Of course, that included his suit, which was made by Logan. He wore this as normal, all apart from the head, only allowing his eyes to come through. The suit was easily adjustable, and Quinn could quickly lift the hood to cover the top of his head at any time. That's why it wasn't a problem for him if he wanted to hide his identity from others. The reason for him doing this was that he no longer had his blood bank. His second chance. In all of his fights so far, he had always relied on the blood bank to help him in his time of need. There was no more blood in the flask. Fex had consumed all of it, and in doing so, it looked like his wounds were healing too. The armor that Logan created gave him some additional defense. Although it wasn't much, every little increment would help, and this was his reason for putting it on. They were about to head to the tower, and if the guard outside was that strong, Quinn feared that perhaps there was an even stronger guard inside. If that was the case, he wouldn't even bother fighting and would abandon the quest. No matter how curious he was, or how good the reward for the quest was, it wasn't worth his life. "Are you all ready then?" Quinn asked Fex. While they were waiting for both Fex's wounds to heal and Quinn's MC points to return, Fex was troubled in his thoughts. This whole time, he was thinking about Quinn. "Quinn, wait!" Fex said as he rushed over and bowed down on one knee with his fist on the floor. "Whoa, what's this all about?" Quinn asked, shocked by Fex's actions. "I have to do this, please. Quinn, you saved my life. I remember everything that happened while I was the bloodsucker. When those travelers came and found me, you were already safe. The king-tier beast was, and the only thing that was trying to was me. I knew it was a risk to turn into that thing, but it was the only thing I could think of at the time. When you saw that I was hurt, even though you were safe, you risked your life. You fought against those travelers and risked me chasing after you. Finally, you used the flask that I had given you to save me." After saying these words, Fex punched the ground in anger. Quinn didn't quite understand this action, but he was sure it was because he was angry at himself. This whole time, he had been getting closer to Quinn for one reason, to save his own back. If he was ever to be found out by his clan, then Fex's idea was to turn Quinn in as one of the shadow users. With this information, the leader, his father, would lessen the punishment for running into the human world without permission. While Quinn had never thought about abandoning him, he had even risked his life going against a group that was able to outmatch him, even as a bloodsucker. Fex no longer cared about how he was able to do it, or why he seemed to keep growing stronger. He had just had this feeling of guilt over his heart that he wanted to get rid of. "I know I've said this before, but seriously, if there is anything you need help with, don't hesitate to ask. I'm on your side, Quinn." Quinn didn't know what to say. These actions seemed out of the blue to him. Someone who had never been serious since the day he had met him was suddenly being very serious. At the time, Quinn had only done what he felt was right. Fex had risked his life to save the whole group. What right did he have to die by the hand of strangers? Still, seeing him like this, Quinn didn't know why, but he naturally walked over to Fex and extended his hand. Fex, in return, naturally took it and lifted himself. "We're blood brothers from now on," Fex said with a smile. "We may not be related by blood, but I will treat you as a part of my family." "And I will do the same," Quinn said with a smile. The two of them then headed off for the tower, and while on their way, they were both cautious with their footsteps. Then again, Quinn was a little less worried than Fex seemed to be. Judging by the text of the quest from earlier and the information it had given him, the quest indicated that the strongest beast outside of the tower was King Tyr. If the information was correct, it meant that there was nothing stronger than the king-tier beast outside the tower. Still, that also meant there was the possibility of them running into advanced or intermediate-tier beasts. Although they would be able to do something since they're together, with no blood and no humans around, it would be risky to go into battle after battle. After slowly creeping their way towards the tower, by going through buildings rather than going down the open street towards the tower, it seemed like they hadn't seen a single beast on their way there. This included the hounds they had first seen when they arrived. Is it the strange crystals from the top of the tower, or did the other beasts stay away from this place because of the king-tier beast? Quinn thought. Finally, they had arrived at the location of the tower. The street finally ended, and now there was a large empty ring of space surrounding the tower. The circle had several paths leading towards other streets surrounded by buildings, but nothing apart from the tower stood alone in the center. The crystals shone brightly at the top and gave off a slightly blue hue to the area below it. They looked at the houses and then at each other. It looked quite beautiful and peaceful, Quinn thought. He could see some advantages to living in a place like this, despite it being away from the sunlight. Maybe I'm becoming more like a vampire if I think a place like this is nice to live in, he thought. We can take some time to explore if you're worried, Fex said, as he saw Quinn admiring the tower. What do you mean? Quinn replied. I just thought you might be worried. The others would leave with those travelers. More than likely, they already know of an exit. I asked my little Ham to follow them from above. Once he knows where the exit is, he'll come and find me. Ham, is that the little flying bull from earlier? Quinn was quite interested in the companion, wondering if he was able to get something like that himself. Yeah, good name, right? Ignoring Fex's last words, Quinn continued to walk up to the tower. There was a single large double door with an arched entrance. The door was engraved with strange patterns, all of which Quinn had seen in images before while learning about the Dalkey architecture. But right now, he wasn't too sure if it was Dalkey-related or vampire-related. In the middle of the door, there was a circular hole that seemed to go a few inches deep. It's a lock, Fex said. These doors, I've seen them in my castle before. They're impossible to open without some type of key or mechanism. Also, don't even think about trying to break it. Trust me, they're meant to even withstand attacks from the vampire leaders. Doesn't that mean there's something important here? Quinn asked. Yeah, but I don't know what, Fex replied. Going up to the door, Quinn decided to try and give it a push using all his strength. He was half expecting it to do something, but as Fex had informed him, it didn't budge at all. It was hard to imagine Quinn had superpowers while watching him push the door. I told you it was pointless, man. I hate to say it, but perhaps this was a wasted trip after all. Let's just rest somewhere nearby and wait for Ham, and then we can get out of here, Fex shouted. Just as Quinn was about to agree and head off, the system had something to say. Don't give up yet, the system said. Do you remember that red blood crystal you received from defeating the king-tier beast? Why don't you place that on the door and see what happens? The system seemed to know more about this place than it was letting on. He took out the crystal from his inventory and placed it in the strange hole inside the door. Fex, upon seeing this, started wondering, what the heck is he doing? A few moments later, the sounds of mechanical locks being unlocked could be heard. The gears shifted, and the door pulled inwards, opening a way up inside the tower. Are you coming? Quinn asked. Ham was up in the air while looking down at the fairly large town. It was slowly following the group of students, along with the travelers, to see where they were heading. It was high enough in the sky, so the light source on their beast gear was unable to reach Ham. Then again, with his eyesight, he was able to see them quite well in the dark anyway. I hope Master is all right, Ham said, sniffing and allowing the large snot from his nose to lift. He had been crying nearly the whole time, thinking about the possibility of Fex leaving him. He sniffed once, hoping to bring the snot back up from his nose. However, while doing so, he did it just a little too late, allowing a droplet to fall from above. Splat! A small drop of liquid fell on one of the bald twins' heads. Is it raining here? He said as he wiped the wet mark from his head. You idiot, we're underground. Of course it isn't raining. There's probably a river above or condensation or something, the other twin said. As the group was walking, Logan and Peter made sure to stay at the back. However, Lily continued to stay behind the entire group as a type of guard in case anything appeared. Peter's pace was starting to slow a little as he was being more affected by his hunger. "Peter, how long can you hold out? Until we get outside, I might be able to do something by then," Logan whispered. Peter immediately looked up at Logan from his position. He didn't say anything. Instead, his eyes were starting to show a slight tint of red in them. "Okay, looks like you won't last that long." Looking around, Logan was trying to rack his brain for every option possible. Finally, the group had reached one of the tunnels that led out of the city from the streets. While looking at all the tunnels around them, Logan thought the place resembled an ant's nest, with many branching tunnels in the end, all leading to one destination. While walking through the tunnels, Logan had come up with an idea that perhaps would enable Peter to feed away from everyone. But before executing the idea, he needed to get some information. "So with all these tunnels, how do you guys know the way out?" Logan asked. "These tunnels are like a maze, and they either seem to loop with each other or all end up going back to the original town we just left from," Andy replied. "In the end, we never found an exit, so we decided to create our own. In one of the tunnels, we marked ourselves. When we noticed the blue crystal lights, we placed red lights by the tunnel we created ourselves that led up to the surface." With the answer to how to leave the place, Logan could now execute his plan. The other students, including Logan, had come down the tunnels via a strange, plant-like beast. Logan had scanned the place before coming down, so he knew there was a space between the surface and the ground they were currently on, and was prepared for it. But even Peter had broken his legs, dropping from such a height, and he had a stronger structure than a regular human. It was a sad thought, but some of the other students were consumed by the strange, plant-like beast. A few of them were most likely unable to make it, and had fallen to their death. Unless they had an ability that could save them, this would be the case. All Logan needed to do was to make them split up with the others and search through the tunnels for one of these that Peter could feed on. It wouldn't be too strange if the teachers found a student's. Beasts would do these types of things all the time. Finally, the group exited the tunnel and entered another larger section with several more tunnels. The second they entered the room, though, Peter loudly screamed as if he was in pain. It seemed too sudden. By Logan's predictions, they should have had more time. Looking around the room, though, he soon spotted the cause. His theory was right. Some students had fallen to their after being consumed by the plant because there were a couple of students in front of them, their bodies mangled on the ground. The smell and sight of the students had caused a reaction inside him. If he hadn't seen them, then perhaps they would really have had more time. Not knowing what to do, Logan rushed towards Peter with his suit still on and picked him up from the ground. If it weren't for the suit he was wearing, Logan wouldn't have been able to even pick up Peter due to the size difference. While lifting him and placing him above his shoulder, Peter remained motionless in the same position, not even moving his hands. He just kept groaning. Right now he was using every bit of energy and was concentrating on not lashing out and going toward the students. But even more so, he didn't want to bite his friend Logan, who was carrying him right now. Logan kept running with Peter on his shoulder, picking a tunnel at random. "Wait, what are you doing?" Lily shouted, concerned for them. The others had already gone over to inspect the other students to see if they were still alive and if there was anything they could do. However, it was too late. Unaware of the commotion going on behind them, they only realized something was happening when Lily shouted out to them. "Wait!" Lily shouted out again, genuinely concerned for the two, so she decided to chase after them. Suddenly, Logan's hand had transformed into one of his blasters. He aimed it at the ceiling and blasted it away, causing the tunnel to crumble down, blocking the path between them. It wouldn't stop them, especially with their powers, but Logan wasn't hoping for that. He had analyzed their leader, Andre, and he was quite a smart man. Hopefully, his seeing Logan do these actions would suggest that something was up, knowing they didn't want to be followed. With his cautious nature, he would suggest that they first go back and hand over the students before returning. And Logan was right. "We should go after them," Lily suggested. She was genuinely concerned for the students' safety, especially since she was the only one that heard one of the students make a strange noise before everything had happened. She couldn't help but wonder if they were related. "No," Andre replied. "Couldn't you see it? The other student caused the tunnel to collapse on purpose. For whatever reason, they wanted to split up. For now, it's best if we leave that mystery unsolved and head back to the base." The students must be scared out of their minds after seeing what they have seen today. The group continued to walk through the tunnels, while also instructing the students to look away from the dead bodies. Sia tried to stay strong, but continued to put her hand over her mouth and eyes as she caught glimpses of the bodies. But the others walked past them with more ease than she. Andre, seeing this, made a mental note. It was as if Vorden and Layla had seen before. The normal reaction to such a thing would be similar to what Sia had done. "Why do you think they ran off?" Layla asked Vorden. "If I was to guess, it would have something to do with Peter again. Logan wouldn't put his neck out on the line like that for no reason." "Do you think Logan will be okay? What if Peter gets hungry again and tries to eat Logan?" Vorden couldn't help but chuckle at Layla's suggestion. "Impossible. Trust me, by now you should have been able to tell. Logan is not the one to worry about if the two of them get into a fight. It's Peter." Although that might have been the case before, Logan had used up several of his trump cards in the fight against the King-tier beast. He was also a bit injured from the battle, and lastly, Quinn had grown stronger from the fight. That meant Peter had to as well. Both Quinn and Fex were excited. They watched the double doors open inward slowly. Throughout Fex's life, he had seen these doors placed not only in his castle, but in the other vampire leaders' castles as well. Every time Fex would ask about what was behind these doors, they would tell him it was none of his business. This, of course, made Fex want to know more about what was behind the doors, but everything he did, he could never find a way to open one of them, and eventually gave up. Once the doors were fully opened, several torches lit up inside the tower, as if leading the way for the two of them. "Come on, we have got to check this out," Fex said, already leading the way and walking forward onto the lit path. Quinn still possessed the blood crystal in his hand. To open the door, he had to insert the crystal inside, but when he took it out, he saw that the doors remained open. This was good for him, since he wanted to put the crystal to some other use, maybe in a weapon or something. Placing it back into his system, he quickly followed after Fex, who was already quite a distance away. After a single step into the tower, the system had popped up with another message. "You have entered a vampire tomb. Quest, explore the tower is now in progress." A vampire tomb? As in a dead vampire's grave? Quinn thought. "System, did you know what this was?" "I had my guesses, but I couldn't be so sure," the system replied. "Remember, in my time the only place we called home was Earth. I did not know about places outside of Earth. These are two things I should warn you about before you proceed. First, a vampire tomb doesn't necessarily mean a vampire is. A vampire can choose to go into eternal slumber, which is similar to, but not the same. If they are in quite a high position or of importance to people, one of these towers will be created for them. Eternal slumber means a vampire has chosen to go to sleep forever themselves. It's a permanent state, and there is only one way to be woken up from it, by consuming the blood of someone of the same family. They do not need to be related by blood, but only contain the same blood. An example of this is, if you were to go into eternal slumber, then Peter would be able to wake you up with his blood, as he is part of your family, but Fex's blood would be useless. "Are there usually guards in these types of places?" Quinn asked, still worried they might encounter something. "Usually, I would say not. Could you imagine asking someone to look over such a place, and for how long? They could be in the tower for a very long time. I would be bored out of my mind staying in such a dull place. My guess is two things. Either the vampire was a powerful one, and his magic was so great he was able to convince the king-tier beast to act as a guard. To keep it under its control for so long, it had the blood crystal which you obtained after defeating the beast. My second guess would be that after the beast found the blood crystal, it was compelled to this area. Something was telling it that there was something powerful inside, and it didn't know how to use it. At the same time, it couldn't leave this place due to its curiosity of power." Both things sounded possible. What Quinn didn't want it to be was some ancient powerful vampire that had decided to go to sleep on another planet somewhere. At least there was no chance for Quinn to wake it up. He was human, and he was his family member. His blood couldn't be used to wake up any vampires. With this, Quinn decided to carry on forward. If this was a grave, then maybe just like pharaohs did in the past, they would bury themselves with their treasures. Excited by this prospect, he started to jog after Fex, who had gone quite a way ahead. After they both followed the torches down the path, it eventually led them to a large staircase leading upward. "If these stairs lead to the top, then it's going to be a painful walk," Fex said. They had no choice but to climb. It wasn't as hard as Quinn initially thought. The stairs were many, and if it was Quinn before he had turned into a vampire, he would have had to take several breaks. The two of them powered through the many stairs and didn't feel very tired. However, they did feel like the stairs would go on forever and were wondering when they would end. Finally, the stairs had leveled out onto a platform, and another large door could be seen. It was the same size as the one at the entrance, only this one didn't have a strange lock-like mechanism. Up ahead after the platform were even more stairs leading up, suggesting they hadn't reached the top yet. "Maybe we should check it out before we continue going up," Quinn suggested. "Wouldn't want to miss out on anything." "Agreed," Fex replied. With a strong push, the doors opened. They were heavy, but with the two of them, they were able to swing the door open. Just like when they opened the door below, torches around the room suddenly lit up. Instead of lighting up a path, this time the whole room was lit up. It was a fairly large square room, but at the same time it was completely bare. There was nothing inside the room apart from 5 podiums in the center of the room. Each podium had an item on it. They were pieces of armor, a chest piece, a leg piece, an arm piece, and a helmet. Lastly, on the final podium, was a ring. The armor had a strange medieval design to it and didn't look like any of the beast gear Quinn had ever seen. It looked almost like knightly armor, only with points and such at the end in red. If dragons existed, this is what Quinn would imagine armor being made from a red dragon would look like. "I can't believe it," Fex said. "This is ancient old vampire combat armor. I've only seen these things in books. Not even our castle has a set like this." Fex slowly walked over to the items, afraid that there might be traps around the room. While heading over to the podium, he carefully placed each foot, but found no such thing. The first podium he arrived at wasn't any of the pieces of armor. Instead, it was the ring. "This looks like the one I'm wearing, but slightly different. Maybe you can wear this," Fex said, as he picked up the ring of the podium. In an instant, the room felt like it was starting to shake. "What did you do?" Quinn complained. "Nothing, I just picked up the ring. I was sure there were no traps." When Fex finished saying these words, a strange circular cylinder-like shape lifted from the podium and covered each of the items. The cylinder went all the way up to the ceiling of the room they were in. Once the cylinders were formed, the vibration stopped, and it didn't seem like anything else was going to happen. Looking at the strange metal cylinder, Fex gave it a knock a few times. "Damn it! There's no way we can get that equipment now. This material is the same thing the door down below is made from." Seeing what had happened, Quinn could only assume the other items were locked away once Fex had picked up the ring. Perhaps the same thing would have happened after touching any of the items. Maybe the vampire who slept here was giving them a choice. A reward for discovering the place, but rather than give them everything, he gifted them a single piece of his treasure. "Here," Fex said, as he threw the ring over to Quinn. He caught the ring in the air and took a look at it. "It's yours," Fex said. "I already have one, and I feel like an idiot for touching the ring before making sure everything was okay. If we were only allowed to take one item, then I might have picked the most stupid out of them all." "Inspect. A king-tier blocking ring. When used on a vampire, it will completely block the effects of sunlight, as long as the ring is worn." Seeing the description of the ring, Quinn realized Fex had made a mistake, thinking the ring was the same, because it wasn't. Fex's ring was an advanced level ring that was able to block out the sunlight for 3 hours at a time, and he would have to go back inside to allow it to recharge. But this ring had no such effect. It would allow Quinn to stay in the sun without getting any of the bad side effects as long as it was worn. There was no time limit. With this ring, the one weakness Quinn possessed had disappeared. A huge smile went over his face as he quickly placed the ring on. "I wonder what else is in this tower," he thought. When Logan turned back to look down the tunnel from where they came from, he had saw that no one had followed them. His plan that he made with his quick thinking had worked. Even with Peter on his shoulder, he never slowed down. He kept running down the tunnel until they eventually reached an open space that had a lot of different paths and tunnels for them to choose from. It was similar to one of the areas where they had just come from. The only difference with this open space was that there weren't any dead students littered about. "Let go of me!" Peter shouted, with his eyes now fully red and glowing in the dark. His mouth opened wide, revealing his teeth, which had grown sharper and larger. Logan felt the weight on his shoulder was about to shift. He could tell that something was up, and immediately threw Peter off his shoulder, slamming him onto the ground. The impact was rough since Logan didn't hold himself back. This was because he could feel the strength of Peter, and he knew that he couldn't hold back any of his power. If the two were to get into a scuffle over strength, Logan was sure he wouldn't win. Peter lifted his head and got a glimpse of Logan, who now had his blaster pointed toward him. In return, Peter gave out a type of a snarl and a deep, angry growl. "You're still in there, right, Peter?" said Logan. Hearing his name coming out of Logan's mouth calmed him down a little, but Peter suddenly started to seize. His body furiously shook as he thrashed around on the floor. While doing so, the glow in his eyes seemed to have significantly dimmed. Seeing Peter hurt himself like this, Logan couldn't help but feel sad. It was clear that Peter didn't enjoy this and didn't want to eat him. Instead, he was desperately fighting that primal urge. He started to wonder if he had made a mistake and should have allowed Peter to eat they had first met. Looking for some kind of solution, Logan picked out and held out his altered hand scanner. He had made his alterations to the scanner given by the school. The one he had was able to cover a wider range, and it was what led him to find the underground town in the first place. If it just worked, then he would be able to scan the tunnels and find out where the other deceased students were located. Instead of walking through blindly and playing their chances, they would at least have some benchmark as to where they should go. But for some reason, ever since coming down underground, the scanner was useless. "Why won't you work?" Logan said, and Peter was now standing in front of him with his head facing down towards the ground. It was unknown whether he had recovered his sanity or if he had already been taken over by his hunger and primal urges. Meanwhile, on the other hand, after Quinn and Fex realized that there was nothing the two of them could do to retrieve their items, they decided to leave the room. They had tried attacking the strange cylinder and even tried to dig underneath the ground. However, the black substance that made up the whole tower was also incredibly strong, just as strong as Getherium. It would take nearly their entire strength to break apart small pieces of the tower, and understandably, it would take them a few days to make the slightest progress. If one day they discovered a way to easily break the metal cylinder or the black substance that surrounded the tower, then he could always return and grab the pieces of armor. As they left the room, they continued to ascend the stairs upwards, and at the same time, Fex couldn't stop apologizing to Quinn for being rash and picking up the ring, which caused them to lose their chances of retrieving the other items. He was unaware of how much of a good mood Quinn was in right now for receiving the ring. He no longer would have to look strange carrying an umbrella around with him beneath the scorching sun. Also, when fighting, he no longer needed to rely on the suit. But of course, Quinn was happy that he had the suit. Now it was being used more when he wanted to fight using it and hiding his abilities, rather than as a device to block out the sun. Finally, after a long walk, they reached a platform. It was the final platform. As they also noticed the ceiling above, several blue crystals protruded from beneath the ceiling as well. Upon seeing the crystals, Quinn's greed wanted him to take all the crystals and sell them when he got back, but it would have been difficult anyway unless he could fly to reach and pull out the crystals. It would also waste an incredible amount of time. On the final platform, there was another large, arch-shaped double door like the one before. It also had no lock, and all the two needed to do was push it open with their two hands. Just like every room they had entered before, the lights started to light up one by one, revealing what the room looked like. From the door to the center room was a large red carpet. It reached the center, where there was a very large circle on the ground. The pattern on the circle was similar to that on the door they had first seen. Only there didn't seem to be anywhere for the blood crystal to be put in. Past this was a red carpet on the other end of the circle, which continued forward until it eventually reached a large chair. "Who the hell was this vampire?" Fex said. "It seems like he might have had a hell of an ego. Did he think he was a king or something?" There was only one vampire king or queen, so Fex found it strange that a vampire, perhaps a remainder from the 13 families, or those stationed here, would create such a room. Looking at the large chair, or throne. It looked like only a person of significance would be allowed to sit in such a place. That was when Quinn spotted something while looking at the throne. Everything in the room was a disappointment so far, since there seemed to be nothing there of use, but just behind the chair, a little bit above, it looked like a clear glass pane, and inside was a large, sword-like weapon. The sword didn't look regular, even though it was locked away behind a glass casing. It seemed to have several black chains wrapped around it, from the hilt up to the tip of the blade. Why would a sword need to be chained up when it isn't being held by anyone? Fex, too, had seen the sword and started to rush forward excitedly. After a few steps, he stopped himself as he was reminded of what had happened in the room before. "Quinn, how about you go for this one?" he said, smiling nervously. Quinn walked straight past the throne chair and continued to the glass encasement. While looking at the blade closer, he could tell it was a beast blade rather than just a regular sword. The handguard seemed to be quite scaly and rocky. It was red and had a pattern that matched the armor they had seen earlier. Between the handguard and the bladed part was a red gem. It looked very similar to the crystal that Quinn had obtained after defeating the king-tier beast. From the crystal, inside the sword, a single red line ran up the blade until the tip. It looked like a bar of some sort, but both the crystal and the red line running up the sword seemed to be void of any power. Placing his clawed gauntlet fingertips on the glass pane covering it, he started to use all his strength, hoping to make a scratch or an indentation. Just like with all of the materials they had discovered before in the tower, it was almost unbreakable for him. "I was going to tell you, but I thought you got the gist by now," Fex said, seeing Quinn attempt to break the glass. After giving up on the idea of getting the sword, Quinn was about to search the room to see if there was anything he had missed. He took a step back, and once again the room seemed to slightly vibrate. In front of the sword, a podium started to rise. It wasn't large, and it rose to about waist height, where Quinn was standing. The vibration stopped in the room, and so did the podium. On top, there was a diamond-shaped hole. Quinn looked at Fex to see if he had any clue what was going on. "Don't look at me," Fex replied. "I've been long lost about this place ever since we entered this tower." He was right. Quinn knew more about this tower than Fex, and that was only because the system had informed him that this was a vampire tomb. Still, Quinn had yet to see a casket. The tower didn't have many rooms. There was the ground floor, the middle-level floor, and the top floor. They couldn't miss anything, so where was the vampire being kept? Right now, though, Quinn was more concerned about the podium in front of him. As he gently ran his fingers over the top of the podium, another message appeared. "Would you like to insert your blood crystal? Once inserted, the blood crystal may not be removed. Yes, no. If I select yes, will it allow me to obtain the sword?" While Quinn was in deep thought about the message he had just received, standing by his side, Fex was now acting a little strange. He now had the time to properly analyze the weapon in front of him. "Have I seen something like this before?" Fex said out loud. "Maybe the first leader had something like this, but if that's true, what the hell is something like that doing here?" "You know what type of weapon this is, then?" Quinn asked. "Maybe. Honestly, I'm not sure. I think I saw one of the other vampire families carrying around something like this. But often, the families kept secrets from each other. Everyone would hide their power, and then when the king relinquished their seat, that was the time when everyone revealed their cards. Maybe one of the other leaders knows something more about this weapon, but at least out of all the kids around my age, I have never seen anything like this." Quinn was hoping he could get more information about the weapon in front of him. It seemed pretty obvious that it wanted to place the red blood crystal on the podium in front of him. Most likely, that would lower the barrier blocking the sword. The problem was that the system had declared that once the blood crystal was inserted, it would stay there permanently. The AI voice before had said that the stone was a precious item. "What exactly can a blood crystal be used for?" Quinn asked the system in his head. "I suppose I should tell you, you will have a tough decision ahead of you," the system said. "The blood crystal can be used as a beast crystal. They are used to either create armor or weapons. For certain reasons, these crystals are a lot rarer than beast crystals." "Are they stronger than beast weapons?" Quinn asked, as he was getting a little excited. "It's hard to say, honestly. The unique thing about a blood weapon is that it can evolve and grow stronger. However, depending on the crystal used, there is a limit to its growth and also its starting point. What you have right now in your hand is the lowest tier of blood crystals." An evolving weapon didn't sound too bad to Quinn, while others might be put off by wanting a straight-up powerful weapon. He didn't find it too troubling, as it was similar to the situation he was already in. The idea of his weapon growing stronger while he did as well sounded nice. What put him off, though, was knowing that the crystal he held was the lowest type. He looked at the weapon behind the glass case once again, and it was like nothing he had seen before. He didn't need to ask this, as he was sure of the answer, but asked, just in case. "Is that a blood weapon?" "Yes," the system replied. "How powerful it is from looks alone, I cannot say." Quinn had two choices: to hand in the crystal, or use it to create his weapon. After thinking about it for a while, he had made his decision. There was another major problem if he was to keep the blood crystal, and that was finding someone to create a blood weapon for him. Someone he could trust to keep the secret, and someone who knew how to forge the crystals. Envisioning problems for the future, Quinn decided to hand in the crystal and take the sword instead. "Small blood crystal has been inserted." The room started to shake slightly once again, and the podium, along with the crystal, started to sink into the ground slowly. Eventually, the whole podium was back on the floor, and the vibrations had stopped. "Quest explore the tower complete." There was no reward for completing the quest, but he couldn't be upset about that for long, as he felt like he was about to get the best reward for coming to this place. A large smile appeared on Quinn's face as he rubbed his hands together, waiting to try out his new weapon. After standing there for a few moments, he quickly realized that nothing was happening. The glass covering the sword was still there. "Hey, I think you just got scammed out of your crystal," Fex said, looking at Quinn by his side. His face dropped after hearing those words, since he too thought the same. He started to bang on the glass frame, pounding his fist against it. "Hey, give me my sword! I gave you what you wanted, now it's my turn!" But there was no reply, and the room remained stagnant. Did it do nothing? Did I just lose my chance to create something great? After saying those words, Quinn realized that something was different. The whole energy and the space around them had changed. Somewhere else, underground at the same time, Logan was backing steadily away, holding out his blaster at Peter. He hadn't made any moves yet, but he could see his body slowly breathing in and out, not moving a step from his position. While continuing to back away at a snail's pace, a sudden sound was heard. The sound had indicated from around Logan's waist. Without needing to look, he knew where it had come from. It was his scanner. Using one of his hands, he picked up the scanner and immediately turned it on, and just like he thought, it was a success. For some reason, the scanner was online. After quickly scanning the tunnels around them, Logan found what he was looking for. In one of the tunnels to his right, not too far from here, were the bodies of some students who had met an unfortunate end after falling from above. "Yes, Peter, I think I can solve your problem." In Logan's excitement, he had placed both eyes on the scan only for a brief second. When he looked up, Peter was no longer standing where he was directly in front of him. Back in the strange tower, Quinn realized what was the change he was feeling. After inserting the blood crystal into the podium, it seemed like whatever was blocking out his senses before was no longer there. He could now clearly sense Peter. With this, shock had entered his heart. Sensing Peter now, he could feel a mix of emotions and feelings rush over his mind and body. "Is this because of the fight from before?" Quinn said. "We have to hurry and get back to the others." The tower had been fully explored, and it didn't look like Quinn was going to get his weapon. With Peter like that, he was bound to be dangerous, so he decided to leave the tower, and Fex had no problem following. After the two exited the tower and started to head out of town, Fex turned around and looked at the tower one last time. "Bye-bye, tower. I guess there was nothing that special in there after all. I wonder what is behind my family doors then as well. I hope it's not the same boring stuff we found here." A process had begun when the blood crystal was inserted into the podium and went back into the floor. Slowly, strange mechanisms were at work behind the eyes of the two boys. The crystal was being heated to an incredible degree and was melting down. This process took some time, but when the right amount of heat was reached, a red blood liquid was formed and started slowly to filter down. The liquid flowed in one direction only, downward through a tube-like shape. It continued to go down until eventually it reached its destination. Like a sand timer, it started to drip down, and the sound of it hitting something could be heard. Once all of the blood liquid had dripped out, something started to change. In the top room tower, the large circular pattern on the floor started to shift. The outer ring moved to the right fist, while the inner ring moved to the left. The rings continued to move in different directions each time with a clicking sound. With one click, the outer circle ring would stop. With another, the inner circle would stop. This continued until eventually it reached the large circle in the center. The center circle started to rise from the floor, and it finally stopped when it reached a height a little larger than an average human. A few seconds later, the metal circle cylinder dropped quickly back down to the ground, and left in its place was a human figure. It was a handsome male figure, with pale white skin and dark black hair that seemed to go all the way down to the person's waist. Slowly, his eyes opened and a red glow could be seen. "I wonder how long I've been asleep," the man said. He turned his head to see if there were others around, but he could see no one in the room. "I wonder who woke me up. That's a shame. I would have perhaps given him something as a reward." Holding out his hand with his hand open, he faced it towards the weapon behind the glass. The weapon started to vibrate slightly, and soon the vibrations grew stronger. A strange force compelled it towards the man, and the weapon smashed through the glass and into the man's hand. "Let's see if anything has changed in the outside world," the man said. Just a second ago, Peter was there, right in front of Logan. It was only a brief moment, but after he checked his scanner, when he looked up, no one was there. He had disappeared entirely. Seeing something so dangerous as to potentially be anywhere in the room with him was starting to make even Logan nervous. He no longer had any sticky light balls to shoot out, and his suit only produced enough light for him to be able to see a few meters in front of him. Peter could see as clear as day down here. They were unfavorable odds, and Logan started to curse himself, thinking about how he ever got himself into this type of situation. Before he nearly did anything, in the past, he always thought of the probability of something happening, the risk he would put himself in before taking action. If the odds seemed against him, he would never take the risk. But when he saw Peter writhing in pain and the others there, Logan reacted on instinct, moving him out of the area. A sharp, sudden sound was heard to his right, and a blast was shot from his blaster in an instant. The explosion had only managed to hit the strange black material, which was as strong as always, causing no rubble or stone to break off, but leaving a peculiar smell from the blaster. "I don't want to hurt you, Peter. Suppose I hit you now before you've eaten anything. There's a good chance you can't heal," Logan said calmly. His voice was full of confidence, but inside his mind he was panicking a little. Although Logan's reaction time wasn't beyond that of what a human being was capable of, he was still quite confident in his ability to hit something before it was able to move. Logan was pretty confident he would be able to hit nearly all the students at the school, apart from those with either high-level beast gear or speed-related abilities. But in the attack he just fired right now, he couldn't even see Peter or even an after-image. "I guess you do suit up to be an assassin, but it isn't the time to test it on me," Logan said. As he said those words, groans could be heard once again in a specific direction. When Logan looked at where they were coming from, he could see Peter knelt on the floor, holding his stomach. "Logan, just leave me! I don't think it's safe! Go now!" Peter shouted. Ever since Peter had evolved into a white, his whole demeanor and attitude had changed. The others thought the old Peter was completely gone, lost, but that wasn't true at all. Peter still had feelings, he still had worries, and inside he was still scared as always. There were times when these old feelings and demeanor would show more than others, and one of these times was when he spent time with Logan. He didn't know why, but the others seemed to treat the new Peter differently compared to Logan. It felt like Logan didn't care what he was and never found it strange, the way the new Peter acted. While with the others he could always feel that they felt different, like the Peter they were talking to wasn't the same before. It hurt Peter inside, especially since he knew he was still the same person. One of these people whom he could tell felt this way was Quinn, someone who he considered close. He could see every time Quinn looked at him. It was different from the way he looked at Peter before. It wasn't in a bad way, but it was one of sadness. "Will I never be good enough?" Peter thought. He wasn't back then, and he wasn't now. The only person who he was not good enough for was Logan, and even now, Logan had tried to help him multiple times. If there was one person he would do everything in his power not to eat or hurt, it was Logan. For a moment, Peter was able to fight back his hunger, but in return, he could feel painful pangs in his body. As he looked up at where Logan was before, he could see he had already run off. "Good, you listened," Peter said. He wasn't hurt this time. Seeing Logan run off to save himself, he had already done enough. The pain continued, and Peter honestly wondered if he was going to die. Although he could have let the hunger take over and his body run wild, he wanted to remain in control of his body for as long as possible. Then the sound of footsteps was heard, echoing through, as if someone was running towards them through one of the tunnels. No, if it's another person, I'll attack them as soon as I see them," said Peter. "Stay away! Turn back!" Peter shouted down the tunnel. But the footsteps grew only louder as the person was getting closer. Then, in the darkness, a strange, relatively large object was seen flying through the air, coming towards him. While it was hard to see what it was, Peter knew. Or more to the point, his body knew as he leaped through the air and opened his jaw wide, grabbing the flying object with his mouth. He immediately started to rip it apart with his 2 front teeth and claws, pinning it to the floor. Out of the tunnel, Logan appeared with a student on his back. He placed it on the floor and took a few steps back. "I know this might be disrespectful, but you are already dead. I promise I will find out who your family is and treat them well. They will live a life of happiness due to your help for as long as I am alive." The 2 boys continued to run through the town at breaking speed. On the way to the tower, they hadn't seen any high-level beasts. Quinn was now sure of it. There was nothing left underground that was stronger than the king-tier beast. With this thought in his head, he was able to freely run as fast as he could toward Peter. He was worried about what could happen, mostly since he was with the others, and worried about what would happen if the travelers were to find out and get involved. Following closely behind, Fex was struggling to keep up. "I was right. He has grown stronger at a crazy pace. He's a lot faster than me, and I can barely keep up anymore. But how? Nothing I can think of can make sense anymore. If I want to find out the truth, there's only one thing I can do. Ask. This time, though, I won't ask for someone else." Fex was always hesitant to ask Quinn this question, and before he didn't know why, but now he did. It was because he felt guilty. Thinking about asking the question in the back of his head, he knew he had an ulterior motive. It was as if he was trying to find some secret information to bring back to his family. Now he no longer cared and had decided, no matter what, he wouldn't tell anyone about Quinn. Right now he wanted to find out for himself, for his curiosity. Once they were out of this place, Fex wanted to find out secrets about Quinn. Suddenly, Quinn stopped in his tracks. He had completely slowed down and was no longer running at full speed. "What's wrong?" Fex asked. Truthfully, Fex was out of breath, but seeing that Quinn was fine, he tried his best to hide that he was tired. As soon as Quinn turned away, he would start panting. He still had his pride and didn't want to show that he was now weaker than his friend. There were 2 reasons why Quinn had stopped. The first was that Quinn felt that Peter was no longer hungry. The pain he was feeling up to this point had disappeared. Quinn found it hard to believe that Peter would have been able to eat someone in front of the travelers. He could tell they were strong. "Thank you, Logan," Quinn said under his breath. He didn't know why, but he had a hunch that if anyone could solve the problem, it would have been him. The second reason for stopping was that Quinn could sense and smell a familiar presence. It didn't take long, and soon Fex could smell who it was as well. "You always seem to be in interesting places, Quinn. I think I should start putting a tracker on you and follow you everywhere." A slightly older bald man came out of one of the buildings with his trusty blade by his side. "Ah, it's the teacher," Fex said and pointed. "You should show some respect, young boy. Right now I'm more than just your teacher, but your commanding officer," Leo said. "But I'm happy you're safe. I'm here to search for the remaining students. Your friends who were with you have already been escorted outside to the surface. They returned to the shelter with the rest of the students, and they informed me of this place." Just then Leo stopped mid-sentence. It was strange, and the other 2 were wondering what happened. Not only had he stopped mid-sentence, but Leo was utterly frozen. It was as if he wasn't even breathing anymore. "Quickly!" Leo shouted. "We must get out of here and run!" "What's wrong?" Quinn asked, genuinely concerned. His teacher had always been so composed. Even when going up against the Dalki, he never once ran away, but Quinn was sure of it. Leo had said, "we," which included himself. "There's something down here, something incredibly powerful. I can sense its aura. We have to leave now." Something powerful, Quinn thought. They had already killed the king-tier beast, so Leo couldn't be talking about that, and while exploring the whole place, they had found nothing, and Quinn was unable to sense anything. So what was this powerful being or thing Leo was talking about?
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.